Since becoming a mother, I have had to learn from the ground up what this new chapter and transformation looks like. Snap back who? Motherhood for me has been a slow progression of baby steps into this new uncharted territory, navigating both the highs and the lows while being an immigrant on the countryside of Sweden and a creative longing for community. It has been absolutely wild, leaving me wanting to share my experiences as well as the experiences of other mothers with you, so we can all learn and support one another. In this video, I sit down with Vashtie, one of the coolest mothers I see online, who make work, travel, and motherhood look seamless. But we all know there's always more to the story.
For those of you that don't know who Miss Vashtie is, she is a creative artist, a director, a DJ, a wife, a mother. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we've been following each other. Well, I found you way back when. I didn't start following you on Instagram until I was pregnant, because you, at this point, had become a mother. And I was just like, I need to follow mom content. I have no mothers that I follow. So.
Yeah, and I've been following you for a while. I stumbled upon you years ago when you had done, it was content like how to set up lights and then a curly hair routine, which was, I feel like, a long time ago. So I've known of you for a long time, but I think we started following each other during the pandemic.
Pandemic will do that, and so will motherhood.
Yes.
So we're just gonna go into it. You are a creative, an entrepreneur, and a mom.
Yes.
Those are many hats to wear. I know people don't think it's that big of a deal. They're like, so what? You're a mom. Big whoop-de-doo. But life changes drastically when you become a mom.
Yes.
Let's talk about it.
Okay, let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So what kind of expectations did you have about motherhood, and what actually played out? That's a loaded question.
Yeah, it's very loaded. I think at the point that I'm at now with an almost 3-year-old is that there are stages. You know, when you first have this newborn in your arms, I mean, there's a myriad of emotions. It's a roller coaster of emotions. One second you're ecstatic, the next second you are miserable. There's so many emotions. I think that was the one thing I didn't expect, that my emotions were going to be so varied throughout the day, throughout even 1 hour. And I think also in the beginning I was like, oh, I get what this is. And I'm like, I'm overjoyed and thrilled and excited, but you don't realize that there are stages. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm at the 2-year, 3-year stage, and there's so many things that come with it. So I think I didn't realize that there was, it evolves. It doesn't stay the same, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't think I had real expectations of motherhood. I think I was just hoping not to mess it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you have any kind of notions of other people's fears projected onto you? Because I didn't know this about you, but I didn't know you and I were the same age.
Yeah.
Vashtie is 42. You don't advertise it, but I'm just like, this girl, I never am the person to say, you look so young, but you don't look your age.
Thank you. I don't even, I feel like no one looks their age, but yeah.
Yeah. Did you have to deal with any fears? Because for me, a lot of people were projecting like, oh, you're like super old to be having a child.
Yeah, I think
You're not in those circles.
No, I'm normally afraid of a lot of things. Like I feel like I have a lot of like, I just watch the news too much, news clips, this and that. And so I'm already like overwhelmed with like fear and anxiety. But I think with that, I didn't, because I knew also that a lot of the studies that they had done on that like sort of, what do they call it, geriatric pregnancy or motherhood or whatever. It's so awful. But I don't think that those statistics pertain to so many people. I think also they're outdated from what I've kind of learned. So I honestly, I take care of myself, and maybe that was just also me being very confident. But I felt like I sort of have prepared my body for, for health and wellness for a very long time. So I felt confident in that, even though you never know. I mean, anything can happen at any point, but I felt confident and I didn't worry.
So you prepared yourself just as a lifestyle by making healthy choices.
Yeah.
How did you prepare for pregnancy or even like giving birth?
Yes.
Because I know when it comes to like the first time, at least for me, I'm just like, I need to study everything.
Right. I mean, I like to study everything. I feel like we're similar in that way.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like watching birth stories, watching actual births, and then, following people on YouTube who are like, okay, this is what I did for my pregnancy. Like, everything from like how to oil your belly to like what stretches to do, what kind of squats to do, and just sort of like physically preparing. Mentally, I tried to prepare as much as possible, but again, as in life, there's only so much you can prepare for, and you know, there's not much you can do when showtime arrives. But I feel like I stayed, you know, I guess active. I was working out daily, stretching, and sort of listening to a lot of like meditative and just like very soothing coaching sort of like audio, I don't know, books or things like of that nature.
Yeah. You know what I found was one of the biggest misconceptions with giving birth? There's this overemphasis on the nursery and how you want the hospital or your room to look with like these twinkle lights and like this ambiance. And when it comes down to showtime, none of that matters.
No.
Like, you're completely in survival mode.
Yeah.
So what did that look like for you?
Wait, the birth or just?
Let's go to your birth.
Okay, so it was a home birth. It was planned as a home birth, and yeah, I mean, nothing was like set up. There wasn't any like, you know, positive words of affirmation on the wall. There wasn't. It was just like home, going through. I labored for I think about 30-ish hours.
Back labor.
Back labor, yes. And I had to ultimately transfer to a hospital, which later found out that like baby was basically flipped in the wrong position. Not breached, but just sunny side up, I guess is the term. So basically my plan, because I'm a planner, I like to plan everything. And of course you can't plan anything in life, really. I mean, you can have an idea.
The best.
Especially not in birth. I feel like you can't have a plan, but you can have an idea. So everything that I had in my mind, it did not go as planned. And you just kind of have to roll with the punches, which essentially got me ready for motherhood in a way, because I feel like, again, there's nothing you can plan for.
You know, that's a good point that you bring, because we tend to plan and prepare for what we hope to happen, and then life actually happens. And I think for me as a mother, what I've learned is you do your best, but then you're like, I planned, I tried. Like,
right.
I said no phones, no tablets. I mean, she's using the phone here and there. I try to be like, last case scenario, you can use my phone. But all these things that I did not think I would give into, that I'm like, and here we are.
Yeah, it's, you know, I feel like we're doing the best we can and we're figuring it out as we go. And there's no case study of like, this is how it goes and this is the best way to do it. So I feel like, you know, every family is different, every child is different, and you just figure it out.
Yeah.
Which I'm also doing.
So when you were preparing for your birth, you had a midwife, you had a doula, and how did you find them? And what made you seek out a midwife and a doula? So
I had always envisioned a home birth, and I think just years of like my personality being very like earthy and natural and sort of wanting to do things the most, you know, natural way. I think that was what led me to that. Also, I had watched so much, you know, documentaries and films.
Which documentaries?
The Business of Being Born, which is really good, actually. I think Ricky Lake executive produced it or directed it. That was a driving factor in my decision of wanting a home birth. And then Lathan Thomas, who's a very seasoned doula, who's a friend of mine, her and I had met years prior to me getting pregnant, and I was like really just fascinated with the process of like, how do I prepare myself for birth? She actually gave me a real plan of like how to cleanse your body for birth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which at the time when I actually ended up getting pregnant, I hadn't done that because I hadn't really planned for that. But she did give a really interesting plan, which was basically like weeding out dairy, alcohol, and gluten.
Oh, so at this point you weren't vegan?
No, I was.
Oh, you were?
Was, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, with like alcohol and gluten, I was like, you know, open to. So,
okay.
But she was saying, you know, and I'm probably not giving it as a great description as she can, but it was basically like ridding your body of all the toxins, including like sugar and whatever. 4 months, because apparently the female body holds on to it, but she was saying if your potential partner should also do this. But it didn't need to be as long as a woman, because I guess men can easily detoxify based off of what she said. But you know what, go to her, she'll tell you all that information. So when I met with her, she had given me also suggestions of like midwives or doctors if I had chosen to do so. So I was exploring that whole world.
And what do you think the benefit of having a midwife or doula is? Even if it's not at home, if it's at a hospital.
Right. So for me, I guess I can't compare it to anything else, but from what I had as my experience with a midwife and a doula was that the midwives were really focused and like passionate about, you know, having the best birth for you and in creating that space, creating that trust, but also along the way being as educational as possible. So we probably met, it was during the pandemic, so I met with the midwives and the other moms who were giving birth around the same time as I, like weekly for classes, and we would go over.
With the midwife?
Yes.
Oh, wow. So meeting weekly?
Yes. And I should mention, they are, I don't know if they've changed their name, but it's Heart Science Midwifery in New York City. And it's a 2-woman team that are midwives, help to empower me in my psychological, physical, emotional well-being, and prepping me to feel, you know, the confidence that I think that we, our society really like rips away from women or birthing people. I feel like there's like this, we have this innate ability to do these things, and I feel like there's a lot of fear that's placed in us, or this idea that, you know, you can't do this without the assistance of X, Y, and Z. You know, obviously assistance of any sort is great, but I think that there's a lot of fear and that's just put upon us, and I feel like it's overwhelming, because when the time comes, you don't feel prepared, you don't feel the strength or the courage or the power in your own body, because it's been kind of ripped away from us. I mean, that's how I felt personally.
I think a lot of people can relate. I know for me, I was aware that the system is designed in a way to make you doubt and question yourself, because I hear so many stories of women just like, it didn't go the way I wanted, they did this, they did that. So, and I think being a Black woman, especially in the US, for me, I'm just like, okay, prepare for the worst.
Right.
So I was just like, so much so that I think that actually kind of hurt me, because I allowed my fears to not necessarily impact my birthing experience, but my post experience. So yeah, to your point, I think having a midwife and a doula definitely helps to make you feel more empowered. There's a sense of community that we are lacking in a world where everything is so condensed.
Yeah.
Your neighbors are like left, right, and center, and you don't know their names.
Right.
So it's a weird position to be, where you have community, but there's so much space.
Yeah.
In that. So we're gonna make our way into breastfeeding. Yes. I was on the struggle bus for breastfeeding.
Same, I was.
Actually, I think that's when we started talking. You were like, Maya, hang in there. I was like, okay, sis.
Yeah. For me, my journey was really, again, I had this idea that I would have this like beautiful home birth. It would be like that, and then I would give birth, and then I would just be breastfeeding, and it didn't happen at all like that. And when breastfeeding came around, I had a hard time getting my child to latch, and you know, the midwives and the doula had come over and basically were like, okay, so she's pretty small. She was like 6 pounds when she was born.
Okay.
And because her mouth is so small, like getting in there at the right angle was a challenge for me without assistance. So when they were around, it was like, okay, they could help me get in there. And then when they weren't around, it was like really, really challenging. And this is how I learned about donor milk, which I didn't even know was an actual thing. And I think that that's also an important element. I don't know how people feel about it, but for me, it was essentially a lifesaver, because I'm obviously, whatever you choose, formula or breastfeeding, I really wanted to breastfeed my child. And you know, when I was having a hard time feeding her, our doula basically put us on to like donor milk. Like there's a community of other mothers who will give you their milk that they just have an extra supply of in order for you to like feed your child while your milk starts to just come in. And so my milk was there, it was just I couldn't really figure out how to get her to latch.
Right.
So then after that point, she was too small for a bottle, so we were at some point she did become old enough for a bottle. We were feeding her with syringes of milk. My milk or donor milk.
Were you pumping at the time?
At the time, no. No, yes, I was, in order to give her milk. So it started off that way with syringe feeding, and then eventually it was bottle feeding. So I was pumping and then bottle feeding. So it was like so much more exhausting than, you know, in the middle of the night, newborn feedings, just, you know, popping a boob in the mouth was, you know, would have been ideal. But instead I was getting up every 2 to 3 hours pumping, and then my husband would then bottle feed. So we were just completely overwhelmed.
Yo, those first few weeks or maybe month, no sleep.
Yeah, no. Sleep is non-existent. I was completely delirious. I don't know about other people. I was like, there's so much I don't remember. But it was challenging. I think it took like a month or more before I was able to just like figure out how to get her to latch. I think it also in the beginning I was frustrated with trying because she would be so hungry that it was like trying to get, you know, in there was like too much. So then I was always just like popping a bottle of breast milk in her mouth. And then finally I was like, let me just keep trying. And then I was able to do it. And for me, it was worth it. I feel like it was honestly a bonding experience. It's a bonding experience, but I also think, you know, there are times when you really do want your independence back, and you don't want to be tied to someone's like constantly. At some point, you do want your body back and your time back. But I do truly love those times of breastfeeding, because it was also easy to just be like, all right, come here, like on a plane, just like, you know, you don't have to look for parts or whatever
to warm up.
And again, not saying that's, you know, whatever you choose is great, but I think for me it really was a great choice for me.
After breastfeeding, I realized, whoa, this should be a natural thing that doesn't feel very natural and is a privilege, because most women have to go back to work. And it's just true. Like, okay, so then you have to either have to buy a pump, and then you have to find the time to pump. And so I completely understand why mothers need to rely on formula, because not everyone can or wants to do it. For me, I wanted to do it, and even though I had this willingness, my nurse was so her ways, and it was formula. Oh, your daughter's dropping in weight at 2 weeks. And another midwife was like, so just keep breastfeeding her. So because we were first-time parents, it's like her fears getting into Max's head, getting into my head, and then it's like, at the end of the day, I just want my daughter fed. So as much as I wanted to, I had to do combo feeding, but it was like depressing me at some point, because it's like my entire value was tied into my ability to breastfeed. And so I just started to have to reason with myself and be like, even 1 teaspoon is better than none. So that
is true. There's so much that's tied into it, and it's funny that I can look back on that now and really see that. I don't think in the moment I realized that until you just said it.
Oh, really? It's like you do all this work to prepare for giving birth, and then you get the baby and you have to breastfeed. And then it's like a job. It's a full-time job.
It is.
And I did not know that. Like, I knew it was going to be work. I had no idea. I had no idea how much work. But we made it to the other side. Now, you're pregnant with baby number 2.
I am.
Now, I don't know about you, but a lot of moms talk about, like, revenge baby. Like, I'm going to do this differently with baby number 2. Do you have any, I want to do this differently, or I'm going to do this the same?
I'm so fascinated with revenge baby. I don't know.
Maybe that's not a saying. That's my saying.
That's a good saying. I think for me, no. I think it's funny because I feel like people who I know who have had like their second say that they forget that they're pregnant. I'm like, before when I was pregnant, I knew every second of the day I was pregnant. Now I'm like completely forget, because I'm also with a toddler who's running around. So it's I don't really have much time to be like, I don't even remember what week I'm pregnant. I don't know what the month is. But I mean, I know my due date, I know X, Y, and Z, but I think for me, I don't really have that actually. That's
no, you
interesting.
don't have that.
No. I think I'm going to just do it exactly the same, I think.
You're preparing for a home birth? You're not preparing for a home birth.
No, so I'm preparing for a birth with midwives in a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the difference, I think. But I think as far as raising, birthing, I mean, that's just the only difference. But everything I think would be the same. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I would, I guess I don't want to call it revenge birth, but if I had number 2,
What would you do different?
I would do everything differently.
Really?
Yeah. Like, Max brought up a good point. I was like, I don't want to give birth on the countryside like I did.
Oh, okay.
Like, everyone has this idea of like, oh, it's so awesome to be in nature and like, you know, in your land. And yeah, I mean, if you live in a community, but I think a big misconception that people have is living in the countryside is beautiful until you become a parent. Then for me, at least, and Max, it's like we want community,
Right.
which is something we're gaining now that Saga's in daycare, but we didn't have that when she was just here. Like, we didn't know anyone.
Right. Yeah, I think I was watching one of your videos and the midwife, I think, was like on a long drive to get to you or something, and it took a while. Or was it your doula?
Both. I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it was like a 2-3 hour drive.
Wow. So where do you think you would birth for the next one?
I was wondering that, because sometimes a home birth, like, I did it because of necessity. I didn't want to drive an hour to the hospital. If I had the option of a birth center at the time, I would have done that. But now that I've done it, I almost like know what to expect.
Right.
So I might be open to doing it again at home.
Yeah, we don't really have. I mean, at least in New York City, there aren't any functioning birth centers. Yeah,
Really?
yeah, and also finding a hospital that will birth with a midwife is also rare, at least in the New York area.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also it was COVID. That was also a concern when I gave birth. So it was like we weren't sure if my husband could come to the hospital and what was that going to be like. And so it just seemed like home birth, especially at that time, was like the best thing to do.
I think I might do home birth just because of having more control. I think that's what I like. And then I read this book, Ina May's Guide to Giving Birth. Have you heard that about the book? I recommend it.
Okay.
But she talks about giving birth and the law of sphincter, the sphincter law, where most people don't feel comfortable pooing in front of someone.
Right.
So they had this experiment where they would pay someone. I'm
unbuttoning my pants.
Do it.
Sorry.
Go for it. They would pay people to poo in front of other people. And even though there was money as an incentive, it was a study. I don't know,
okay.
Double check it. But they couldn't poo because people were watching them. So she used that same principle for giving birth. Depending on who's there or how comfortable you are, you can't necessarily give birth in the presence of other people.
Right.
So I found that was true with my case because it took 5 hours and I was like, my baby isn't progressing, please leave the room.
So I feel like that might be my revenge baby. Maybe trying to give birth without people there, because that's also something that our midwives prepared us for for birthing. They definitely recommended, one, not telling people your actual due date because people will hound you, especially family. But also, like not giving people like a play-by-play of like, oh, this is happening at the birth, like now we're doing this and now we're doing that, because it's too much stress, it's too much, your body can't relax. And the whole experience is, we are evolved, we're humans, but it's very animalistic what we endure and what we have to go through. And especially, we kind of chatted about this off camera about how your manners and your normal personality is out the door when you are giving birth. It's like, there's no please and thank you. It's like, get out of my face, do this or do that. And I think, that's a really great representation, because it's like you have this real animalistic experience and you need the space and the comfort to be able to get into that zone.
Yeah, I think it's a very intimate moment. And in the way that the hospitals are set up, and like the fluorescent lights and like the cold tables and the stirrups, and it's just like some person like no. I wouldn't feel comfortable with you doing this if I wasn't in labor,
Right.
let alone me trying to push with some rando there.
Yeah.
So if I could, that's what I would do. I'd probably kick people out, but because it's their hospital, it's their rules.
Right.
So I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
Maybe I'll try.
or the other advantage, which I think you did, is labor as much as you can at home.
Yeah.
So you have less time in the hospital, because once you're there, they put you on a
Right. Yeah.
clock watch, and they're like, we got to get her,
Yeah.
we got to get her out.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, okay, so you're a mom, you're pregnant, you don't have any plans of doing revenge babies. How are you managing with work and motherhood? Because that is, for me, I was struggling
Right.
until I had the help of daycare.
Okay. So I went back to work officially. It was also because there was not much work. So during
Right.
COVID.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I gave birth in 2020. 2021 was sort of a slow year for me because a lot of my work is actually like in the public. So
Right.
a lot of my work is DJing or attending events, and there was
No
like none of
events.
that. So I didn't have much in that space. But in 2021, after like a year of, having given birth, I went back to work. I was working on a production. And so we got a part-time nanny who's incredible. And that really helped. But now that, it's 2023 and I'm doing much more, I'm DJing much more, flying, traveling, going to events. And so it's definitely picked up. And I think now I definitely need more support.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of our work, it's not on a schedule. It's like we have to manage ourselves and we have to deliver ourselves. So I think there's so much that goes into it. And, I imagine it would be different if I, work, with a normal situation, like in an office or having someone, like where I clock out and I'm done. But it's like, I feel like we're constantly working as a creative, especially creatives who work for themselves. So, it's definitely a challenge because it's like, sneaking in, like doing, work on the phone or doing work, here and there, even late after hours and trying to figure that out. It's a challenge, but I think for me, I try and be as solution oriented as possible, which I feel like you are definitely that personality.
Trying to solve all the problems.
Yes. I think, I can easily not be that way. I think for me, it's a learned habit that I'm constantly trying to perfect. And I think chatting with you has also helped me think about that more instead of just being like, oh, it's not going to happen, or, oh, this is not working. And instead of focusing on what's not working, trying to figure out what the solution is definitely something. I think I don't know if that's just also a part of motherhood, because then you realize like, okay, you have 10 minutes. What can I do in this 10 minutes?
Gosh.
It really keeps you on your toes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you mentioned putting her to sleep. That is where I think a lot of mothers can have like wiggle room for some freedom.
Yeah.
Like getting the sleep routine down. Because
that's important.
I didn't get that. I was like night nursing so that I can up my like milk supply. And then I created like a sleep association that I had to like figure out and break. But then I was telling myself, because you have to come up with solutions as a mom. And I'm like, if I could get her to sleep on her own without me, I'll have 2-3 hours that I can do something, work, chill, do something for me. And so I was like, you need to get this sleep under control.
Yeah.
And so that was the next thing that I tackled, sleeping. And you had recommended.
Her online classes are called Taking Care of Babies. So it's like a play on her name. But it's basically sleep training. But I know that term, has a lot of friction.
Sleep preparation.
Right. It's not crying it out for hours, because I could not do that. But
No.
I know some parents have done it and it works for them. But for me, it's not that. It's sort of like, making sure it's empowering your child to fall asleep on their own, because they have the ability to do it, which is what I believe.
I think that's the good word, empowering them.
Yeah.
Because I looked at it like that, like give them a tool.
Exactly.
So they can do this for themselves.
Exactly. So we did that pretty early on, and I think around 4 or 5 months. And then, she's been an excellent sleeper, but now she's a toddler. And so toddlers,
what does that mean?
That means there's a lot of fighting of sleep.
Oh yeah, because she can fight back now.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's also making sure that they're not going to bed too late, because once they go to bed too late, they're overtired. So then they have this like spark of energy of running around, and There's phases to it, you know. The newborn phase is definitely, for me, it was exhausting and overwhelming, but it was like the sweet time when they're so tiny and little, and then it's like once they're running and talking and they know what ice cream is or TV is, and it's a whole nother ballpark. And apparently my friends with older kids are like, oh, wait till you get to...
They keep saying that.
It's like, yeah, it's every phase and stage is different. And it's so funny because I did a podcast interview, and in the interview, the girl, Danielle Robay is her name, she mentioned, oh, like you had an Instagram post of you and your daughter, and it was like, oh, my favorite job being a mom or something, which, you know, at the time was very true, and it is true.
Okay.
But then, you know, there are layers to it where it's like, you're like, oh my God, like, what is going on? Yes. So, you know, it's a roller coaster of emotions. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't trade it for anything, and clearly I'm doing it again because I loved it so much. And but yeah, no, it's definitely, it has its moments. It's testing you, but I honestly feel like you have these moments where the appreciation and the gratitude, it's so much stronger than before I had a child. It's just like I'm able to really appreciate like the smallest things, the real intimate moments, like things that I thought were important to me before. Not to say that they're not important to other people, but you know, just having these small moments, it's totally different. It's a game changer.
Yeah. And is it possible to be a parent while being a creative?
Yes, it is. One of my really good friends, Nigel Holt, has said to me many times, as a beginning parent, he has an older kid, but he's told me, you know, like so many people make excuses. They'll use their kid as an excuse for not doing what they need to do, or doing what they want to do. And, you know, I know that so many things are especially harder for people who are non-creatives or people who don't live in major cities or have, you know, the same access as we do. But, you know, I do believe also in the truth that if you make time for specific things and you find ways to do that, that it's possible. You know, so I think I don't want to make it seem like it's a super easy thing that anyone can do, but I do believe that you can better yourself, perfect yourself, whether that's personal or professional. I do believe that, you know, there's ways to do it. I mean, my parents were working class immigrants. My mom went to school at night, worked during the day, had 3 kids, and, you know, had the education of probably junior high, maybe that from Trinidad. So, you know, and she figured out a lot of things on her own.
Yeah. Sometimes when I feel like overwhelmed, I'm like, my mom did it somehow.
I know.
What's my excuse?
I know.
Figure it out.
Right, yeah. But I feel the same way, but I also feel like we should give ourselves grace, because I think emotionally sometimes those different generations didn't have
social media.
Yeah, and they also didn't have, I won't call it a luxury, but they didn't have the space to feel like, you know, I can say that I'm not okay, or I can say, you know what I mean? But there's both of that. But yeah, but I do the same thing. I'm like, I never saw my mom cry once, and she had 3 kids, and, you know, and I'm like constantly crying.
Yeah, I saw my mom cry once.
Oh, wow.
And I knew it was a lot.
Yeah.
So if there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely.
Literally baby steps.
Yes.
One foot in front of the other. Thank you so much, Vashtie, for stopping by. Yay! Finally, I'm so glad that we got to do this. For those that have never heard of you or would like to find out more about you, where can they find you?
You can find me at my Instagram, which is my name, Vashtie, Vashtie.
Thank you, and thank you guys for watching. And if you like this, let us know what you thought about our conversation. And if you have questions, let us know in the comments below.
Yeah.